Hello, welcome back. This is the Transform Work Videocast. My name is Jonathan. I'm going to be your anchor today, and I'm also the manager for the People and Culture Association that's producing this Transform Work Videocast. It's been a long while since we last saw you live on the Transform Work Videocast. So I normally say welcome back, but this has been a long time coming. So welcome back once again. We do this videocast almost every fortnight, and we've got a special lineup of speakers for you today. But a little bit more about the BC before we get started, in case you've forgotten about us. It's been a while since I said hi. So you can join us as a member. We've got members from different parts of the globe, HR professionals, people and culture officers. We've got lawyers, mediators, mental health professionals, HR managers who have joined us on this journey. We're roughly around 600 members now at the PCA. We meet in the last week of every month to just discuss trends, successes, and whatever else is happening in the people and culture and leadership space. And we've got some fantastic conversations every time we meet. So if you haven't joined us yet, the membership, it's free. All you got to do is just scan that code on your screen right now, and it should take you straight to the webpage. I'll also be sharing with you some more information. Like you can see the kicker at the bottom of your screen, which once again gives you that email address that you can write into us, and I can share you some more details about the membership. All right, so a little bit more about PCA, but of course, we are involved in research. We've got some live events that we do, like the video cast right now. We have the book club sessions that also take place once a month. The book club sessions, of course, allow us to speak to authors in the people and culture space. That's another exciting space to be in as well. We have the International People and Culture Review that happens once a year. And of course, the big one, the International People and Culture Week, which happens in the first week of May. So May 1st to 7th, 2026, you can book that right now. It's got some fantastic speakers already lined up. But today, it's all about Singable. It's all about Ollie Culverhouse and Christina Green, who will join us on this fantastic videocast. A quick introduction for those of you who don't know Ollie yet. Of course, I'm sure you already do. He's the founder and CEO of Singable. He's been a serial entrepreneur right from his teenage days, as I understand. Right from the time he was 15 or 18 years old, and he's, of course, created this fantastic company. So for those of you who don't know Singable, it's an electronic signature product, which helps companies get their documents and contracts signed online using an electronic signature. The last I heard, they have around 6,000 customers. I'm sure that number has changed, and Chrissy will remind us of that very, very soon. But of course, it currently sends out over 200,000 documents per month to its customers across the globe. So Ollie, once again, thank you so much for making time. We appreciate you being here on this videocast.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, good to be here.
Awesome, and of course, it's a big team. It's got a few dozen members in that, very hardworking members, and keeping them all together is the Chief People Officer, Chrissy Green, who of course joined us on this conversation as well. Chrissy has been with Singable for some time now, and she's been able to create that ideal blueprint in terms of having a fantastic people and culture plan for the organization and holding this conversation together. Of course, Chrissy, first of all, thank you so much for making time to be on this videocast.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. David, you do not need an introduction, but for those of us who are on this call that don't know you yet, you are, of course, the CEO and the founder of the TCM Group. David, of course, also the president of the PCA, and is working very hard to bring that much awaited book out, People and Culture. The last I heard, it's going to be out in the first week of January 2026. So really looking forward to that as we start building up to a fantastic new year. But David, thank you so much for anchoring this conversation once again.
Jonathan, it is always a pleasure. It's good to be back. It feels like it's been a bit of a hiatus, and obviously in that hiatus, this much talked about book, as you mentioned, called People and Culture, which is where I first met Chrissy and heard of the wonderful work that's happening at Singable, one of the 30 or so case studies in the book People and Culture, celebrating the incredible work of a modern people profession. So yeah, been away. My fingers are sore, my neck's aching, my back is a little bit jippy, but it's nice to be back in the seat and having some great conversations about our favorite topics, people, culture, and leadership. So yeah, really pleased to be back, Jonathan, and good to see you again. It's been a while.
It's been a while. I know you love this very much, so I won't take too much time. I think it's time to dive into that conversation, dive into the case study with Singable, with Chrissy and Ollie. But for those of you joining us online, if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, say hi, tell us where you're joining us from. use the comment section. If you agree with what we're saying, you can agree with us. If you don't agree, you have a different opinion, you can write them down too. If you have a question for Ollie or Chrissy or David, you can use the comment section on LinkedIn and put that down as well. Well, David, Ollie, Chrissy, the virtual studio is all yours.
Jonathan, thank you so much. What a joy, and what a lovely way to spend an autumnal Friday here. So I'm based in Saffron Walden. Ollie, we're just talking. I think you're in Bristol. Whereabouts are you, Christy, today?
I'm just over the bridge in Chepstow.
Oh, very nice. What lovely parts of the world. So it's lovely to have you here. And I know we have a lot of people joining us from the UK and globally for our Transforming Work videocast. So if you are here and you are listening to us live on LinkedIn and you have questions for myself or Ollie or Chrissy, please feel free to put them in the comments section. We'll be keeping an eye on that. And if you've got any questions or thoughts, then please share those. We're also really keen to hear from those of you who are delivering best practice in the area of people and culture and leadership. So if there's anything that you're doing in your own organization, any innovations or creative solutions to some of those perennial challenges, please do share them. But I love starting these with a bit of storytelling, and I think it's really important. So I always like to know, Ollie, we were talking before we started about the importance of the why. What's the why? And I just wonder, Ollie, if you could introduce yourself and explain why are you here? How did you get into being the executive at Singable? What's your story and what's the why behind your experience as a leader?
Yeah. As kind of touched on at the beginning, I had businesses. I say businesses mostly for beer money during university and previously. And I've always been involved in and interested in the internet and computers and software. Kind of at the right time, lucky enough to be at the right time where, as I was growing up, people started having computers everywhere, and the internet was this kind of magical thing that wasn't run by corporations and everything else. So kind of got swept up in all of that, and then decided to I wanted to set up a business straight after university, like what I would say is a proper business. So when all my other friends were interviewing for roles or graduate schemes, I kind of set up an agency at that time. And it was myself and a friend of mine, but we built software and websites for companies at the time. And Singable was, and that was in 2007, I think it was. And then in 2009, Singable was built, but only as a side project. It was only really as a setup to solve our own issues of getting documents and contracts signed. And so remained as a side project until about 2012, and at which point my friend left the company and I decided to focus only on Singable. It made a lot more sense as a business model to iteratively improve something every single day as a product rather than agency work. And because I'm more logical than a creative, the creative side of things, of where starting from scratch and building something for another company, I wasn't passionate about it, but improving something as a product, I was. So and then from the start, it was obviously just myself. I remember having an office above a flower shop, and it, was myself at the point. So from a leadership, obviously then, obviously a lot of the time I didn't know what I'm doing, but even more so then. So it was really trying to kind of establish what was important. And it took me a few years to start employing and building out the team. The honest answer was that I had to get over that fear of actually employing people, of the fear of everyone's going to sue you if you do something wrong or say something wrong, that kind of scaremongery around there. Yeah. So after a few years, I finally plucked up the courage, and here we are quite a few years later with a team of 55 and more people starting within the next month or so. So I think as I've kind of developed, I think the why has always been in me. It's just kind of been more formalized as we've gone over time. But for me, it's doing that right thing. I think what I talk to everyone when they start about is the fact that my decision making comes from the fact that I like to sleep at night.
Okay.
And so I never want to make a decision in the company that means that I lose sleep over that decision. And so it's doing that right thing, but not right thing for the company, not right thing for me personally, not right thing financially either. It's doing the right thing for that situation. So, it might mean when we're going through a redundancy of, giving extra, pay or support or whatever it is in terms of supporting people through that sort of terrible time, or it might mean more day-to-day decisions. But ultimately, I think it's summed up by maybe not my why is that I like sleep, but really it's about making sure that we are doing the right thing. And then that kind of if early days you don't necessarily have a culture because it's yourself. The culture is your reflection of a personality of myself then. And then as you build more people out, it gets a lot more structured, and I'm sure we'll obviously touch on some of the things that makes Singable what it is already. But that's kind of where it comes from, that initial why for me.
I love that. I think that culture as a reflection of self is a really powerful statement, Ollie, and I'm really I completely subscribe to that. I think also we can think about the people and culture function helping to then be almost like a mirror and a map, isn't it? The culture is the sort of mirror reflection of me, and then the people and culture function helps us then to shape that. And there's nothing wrong, I think, and I think I really like the way you connected the concept of leadership about sleeping well. There's a real issue around not sleeping well and making bad decisions when we're tired and not sleeping. The first question I ask when I go into a conference of leaders is, what's keeping you awake at night? And everyone turns around and has the conversation. It invariably comes down to some challenge between the head of sales and head of marketing, or a problem in R&D, or something happening in the business. So it often comes down to people issues, and then it does keep people awake at night. And I think it does have both a physiological and psychological effect, which, if that is then reflected in the culture, impacts in the culture. So I think it's really powerful. Something we'll kind of come back to. And Chrissy, we heard Ollie talking about the concept of risk and fear, and we often think about HR as helping to mitigate risk and fear. But we met each other, and obviously you've contributed for my upcoming book, People and Culture, and it never felt in any way in the case study that the people function is there to reduce fear, to create a really high trust, positive, powerful workplace. And I just wonder, Chrissy, what's your story and how did you get into this? And tell us a little bit about your work at Singable.
Of course. So I started my career in corporate world with everybody else, and then took a leap of faith and became a consultant. And Ollie was my first client over 8 years ago, when there was only 5 people. So he got us on board really early. And although that only started as 1 day a month, actually my contract with Ollie grew and grew to I was doing 2 days a week every week. So 4 years ago, it seemed the right move to actually come on board properly as a part-time employee, but 4 days a week, but full-time for Singable. So it's just, and I have just to say, it's a real pleasure when you are working with a CEO who does invest in people, and sees the importance of the people function, and to be able to do that. I think my time with Ollie, especially early on, probably around 10 people, we started talking about values and kind of interpreting what Ollie's leadership style and what he wanted from a business into the values of what we have today, and we've had for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And it's actually the foundations of what and how we work. I'd say the culture has definitely changed over the years, and has grown with that, but our foundations and values have always been the same. One person leaving when you're so small can impact the culture, and it impacts obviously as we continue to grow and trying to keep that. But we have those strong values and foundations in place that we just need to keep building on.
It's really interesting to hear you say that. So you're nodding as well, Ollie. I know you're being self-deprecating, but you said you didn't know quite what you were doing. But when I look at the reflection on the conversation with Chrissy, it sounds to me like someone who really very much knew what they were doing, creating the values, creating the high trust environment, and some of the language that I hear you using at Singable. So just one of the many quotes, Chrissy, from the case study is, we don't call it probation, we call it a honeymoon. Now, I was doing an employment rights bill webinar just before this one, where there's almost statutory provision for this thing called probation, where we're almost, are we going to be putting some sort of ankle tag on our people next? And you've completely reframed that. Ollie, say some more, because it sounds to me like you are anchored to values, to language, to mindset, and helping to drive the right behaviors. That sounds really powerful to me.
Yeah, I think the first thing, there's the massive difference between saying the right thing and doing the right thing. And I think you have to make sure that your actions are actually just backing it up. And thankfully, when I speak to everyone when they start, they do say that even after a couple of days, they see that what they've been presented has backed that up. But yeah, I mean, obviously honeymoon, again, when someone starts a job, it's much more, it's a two-way thing. I think in the past, there's often been this kind of, and depending on the job market as well, there feels like this this unbalance between employees and employer in terms of the employees should be grateful that they've got a job at all, when actually it's much more that they both should be grateful, because you're obviously hiring someone to help bring the company forward and improve the company, and hopefully they would do that with the right support. So yeah, one example, we call it, the first 3 months we call it a honeymoon, because it is that period of time. It is that period of time where everyone tends to love wherever they are, like in terms of a job, because it is that honeymoon aspect. Also probation, as you kind of inferred to, does sound like you're in prison, or like it doesn't feel that way at all. So throughout that whole honeymoon process, we obviously ensure that we have these, and all the way through the career of someone as Singable, we make sure that they have those conversations to make sure that we're both in line with what each other wants, the employee and the company as a whole. So it's really important to do that. And as I said, it's not just, we don't just reword it because we want to reword it. It really reflects, our actions really reflect that change of language, because I think there is that huge, there can be loads of instances where you're saying the right thing, and again, speaking to people when they start, they have experiences of previous workplaces where they all say the right things for the first, during the job interview process, or the job first couple of months or whatever, and then the toxic leadership or the toxic management, or just in general, it starts falling apart a little bit. And that's really important. That consistency is extremely important, to make sure that from the moment they see that job advert all the way through to the end of their career at Singable, whenever that is, that there's a consistency through that people kind of have that as a authentic kind of self all the way through, from both myself personally and also any manager that manages them and the company as a whole as well.
Wow, I mean, it must show some really interesting opportunities and challenges, I guess, as well, Chrissy, from the sort of, if you like, through the people lens. But the opportunities seem vast, because the concept of sharing power, that the two parties are equitable in the relationship, that's cascading through the management structures and through the organization, through the entire life cycle there, changes the dynamic that we see in the organization, where power sits with the employer, the probationary periods, the policy frameworks, this perception that the employee represents almost the risk, and we're managing or mitigating the risk. It sounds like what Ollie's suggesting here is very much a rethinking of that, not just through words, but through actions. What kind of, as a people professional, a people leader, what sort of opportunities does that create for you? And does it create any challenges? Are there any challenges, or is it just opportunity?
I mean, there's always challenges with any way that you go forward. I think the biggest challenge when we have new people start with us is the way that we work. And especially if they've come from large organisations where it's all been top down and they haven't had the autonomy to be able to do their job, without boundaries. We're mainly remote. We do have an office in Bristol, but majority of people work remotely, and everyone's given trust from day one to get on and make that impact within their role, which is very different. Lots of people have come from maybe been micromanaged. So from going from that to a role where you're go and explore, go and do the role. This is the main bits that, you have the autonomy to take it. You're the specialist in your field.
Yeah.
It can be difficult sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't fit everybody, and that's okay. It's all right for us to have a conversation to say within in that honeymoon or after, to say, actually, this isn't right for me. Or it's it's not working, and it's definitely a two-way. So yes, there is challenges, but when it does work and you see people flourish, and the way that they're growing their own careers with us and what they bring to the business and pushing the business forward, is really exciting. So yes, there's pros and cons to both of it, but it's making sure from a recruitment point of view we have the right people and they know what to expect when they come here too.
Love that. And what do they say about it? What are your people saying about their experience, I suppose? And I'm interested both from the employees, what your employees saying, but does it also cascade and trickle out to your customers? Are they seeing this and saying anything about it? Ollie, what do you hear being said internally, but also do you hear anything being said externally because of the culture you're creating?
I think, yeah, I mean, as I said, speak to everyone, and then it means that people do talk to me rather than just, and I also, the challenge I have, especially as the company gets bigger, is trying to remain accessible for people, not in terms of like, I think there's a real risk of more senior leaders becoming less connected with the rest of the organization. So it is a bit more of a challenge for sure, but I think culturally, I think that the biggest thing that I hear is that it's clear and consistent from everything, and from, as I said, from the start to whenever. So things like the benefits or the package or the values actually stack up to what you do, and they're actually there. I think it's not just the superficial, but we do things like unlimited or minimum holiday as a benefit, and people are often a little bit surprised. In fact, it is actually that. It's not this trick to make people not take fewer holiday, because actually when we rolled it out, we did find that there was no people didn't know what the benchmark was in terms of holiday time, so they didn't take a huge amount. So we then ensured that it's a minimum holiday. So Chrissy and the rest of her team chase up people who haven't taken the minimum holiday throughout the year. And as you can imagine, in certain areas of the company, they do require a bit more chasing up because they love their jobs, obviously. There is that. There's definitely that. And then I think, for me, culture does not stop at that people or HR team. It leads through to everything that we do. So I think you can see that if you are just a new customer and you contact us on phone, email, wherever, and you speak to one of our support team, you can feel that authentic, kind of clear, consistent communication goes all the way through. And you can only do that when you are authentic from the start. If you are trying to be someone that you're not, or a company that you're not at a certain level, you'll get found out at other levels. So for me, it is the right thing for me, but also it's just the easiest thing for me as well to be that consistent through. It's like, why would you pretend to be something at different levels? Just be consistent all the way through, and ultimately everyone will win if you do have that consistent and you do communicate clearly. So there's lots of benefits there, as I said, all the way through.
And do you think, it's really fascinating in terms of, we'll come, Chrissy, to some of the work that you're doing, how you operationalize this. I'm really interested in how you bring this into operational. But you talked there about the holidays. I think from a CEO perspective, obviously there's always a focus on bottom line profit and loss, the kind of growth and the value, EBITDA, and all of those different elements. Is there, I don't want to kind of go into the hard figures, because I think, we want to talk about the people experience. But I also think we can't ignore that there's value creation and wealth generation through businesses. How does this show up in the way you measure the success of Singable, Ollie? And do you have any kind of human capital measure, or is it purely profit? And how from an entrepreneurial perspective, do you see this adding value and competitive advantage to Singable?
Yeah, we're not a charity, so we are not. We are a commercial entity. In this capitalistic world, we're designed to create profit. And that obviously isn't a problem, as I said, in this society. So we ensure that, of course, it's the right thing to do, but we still have a goal, we still have missions, we still have visions to drive the company further and forward in lots of different ways. So I'm not sat here being, completely, socialist or liberal in terms of being of course.
Sound like it.
But so we have a job to do ultimately, and everyone has that job to do. I think the difference, I think Chrissy will definitely back it up in terms of the difference between how I led, especially early days, compared to now is drastically different. But it's to make sure that we are there and we're obviously there driving forward. In terms of kind of how we track those metrics, we do pulse surveys and things like that, as you can imagine, internally. But really, we don't track it on a really minute detail, because you get a feeling, and it sounds very like fluffy, but you do get an understanding through lots of conversations with people, through one-to-ones, which we have. Managers have weekly sort of one-to-ones with their team. So rather than annual appraisals or annual chats where you've forgotten half of the stuff you've done last week, let alone in the last 12 months, we have weekly chats which are purely about, you know, in a space to talk about career opportunities, to talk about salary, to talk about those things that maybe aren't talked about enough in other organizations. So, but you get those feelings, you get feelings through those conversations about whether you're doing the right thing and whether it's improving things. You know, so we obviously, of course, we track all the other metrics, and as long as all the other metrics are going in the right way, and as long as you feel like it's, you know, we're doing that, then yeah, that's good enough for me, really.
No, absolutely. I'll come back to that point. I think it's really important. I'd be really curious to know if you think actually it increases and enhances value within the organization. I think it's a really powerful message, the concept of people, purpose, value, and profit interconnecting. And I'm just curious, Chrissy, so Ollie's set out sort of a very powerful vision for, you know, in jargon terms, the employee value proposition, or the EVP. So, and of course, your role as a people leader is to then help turn that and operationalize that and make that come to life in terms of day to day. I just wonder how you operationalize that and how you create the operational structures through this sort of people lens to help bring Ollie's vision to life, given that there's sort of less hierarchy within that. It's less about power and authority. It's more about autonomy, flexibility, agility, authenticity. These are the words I'm hearing. How do you operationalize that through a people sort of lens, if so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, the business has to be agile. You know, the way that we work, like we've put the one-to-ones in on a weekly basis and monthly development, you know, chats, rather than these OKRs or KPIs, which are like 6 to 12 months long, which actually doesn't do anything for anybody. It's not good for the individuals and it's not good for the business. So from a people team, actually, we work on quarterly OKRs and projects that actually are in response to business needs. Because we have invested in the people team early on, actually, we've been able to do all those proactive projects. You know, being able to look at putting competency frameworks in place to give people a bit more structure and help managers having those conversations, having one-to-one templates for them on a weekly basis so they can actually bring out the best in their team. Although we don't have necessarily any metrics from a, you know, how does it affect profitability? Actually, we know that the rest of the business are hitting their targets each quarter, every 6 months. And actually, from that point of view, we are continuing to grow and everyone has a really important role to play. So we see the impact, although you can't see the specific metrics on return on investment in how we work that way.
Amazing. That's really, really interesting. One of the quotes from the case study, I think, I've kind of paraphrased a little bit here, Chrissy, but culture doesn't live in policies, it lives in how people feel every day. And it's such a powerful way of thinking about the people function, because in so many organizations that I work with and see, we try and sort of translate all of the vision and the structure and the systems and the culture almost through policies, processes and procedures. But you're talking in much more sort of an organic experience, is much for a lived experience. And how does that play out? I mean, presumably you have an employee handbook or policies, or have you redacted them? What does it actually, if I join you in my honeymoon period, what do I receive on day one? What does it look like as a new employee showing up feeling excited and nervous at Singable?
Yeah, I mean, of course we have a handbook. There's a legal part of making sure that policies, but our policies do help support bringing our culture to life. So they're not just written down policies, actually they reflect how we are. So we have additional counselling services for people that they can have. There's, you know, people are encouraged to take more than 2 weeks statutory for paternity. We have additional pay for maternity, paternity. We have, you know, 12 weeks sick pay. If someone's poorly, then you should be off work. We don't want people turning up poorly to work every day and actually that dragging on and just that presenteeism. We'd rather people be poorly at home, get themselves well, and then come back to work. So yes, of course we have policies, but they help bring the day-to-day to life. And it's, if we say what we do what we say. you know, and that's built in to doing the right thing as well in the way that we work.
I love that. I love that. I saw you've got a question, Jonathan, in relation to how we handle conflict. I just wonder, it's a very human-centered, very people-centered approach to business. One I strongly advocate and can see, you know, it's hard to measure the benefits, but those benefits are there. You've talked, Chrissy, about people achieving their targets. I think a happier workplace, it helps us to then drive that productivity and the focus. And I guess there's also, you know, you're working in a really interesting space, Ollie, with Singable in the digital space. People need to be able to trust the digital experience, and Singable provides a platform which we can trust, and AI and digital sort of environment is a massive issue with, you know, Jaguar Land Rover recently in the cyber attack. So we're very concerned about cybersecurity, and Singable provides a very powerful platform to create trust within a space which we're often, and rightly so, just a wee bit nervous about. So your business has potential for huge scalability and opportunity ahead. And I just wonder, as you plan ahead over the next 12, 18, 24 months, how will you as a leader ensure that you retain the soul of Singable that you've created as you're scaling and growing, which, you know, unless I've got it wrong, it looks like the potential is there, and you are clearly in that space of growth. So thoughts around how you keep that soul there and grow.
Yeah, I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive, though. I think you can obviously do the both. Obviously, that's what we're doing it. But that human-centric approach, you know, is as I touched on earlier, is not just at the HR level; it's all the way through. And you know, that software provider is something that we don't want to be. You know, it's how we win customers from our competitors because we're human-centric. Yeah. And I think, how do you maintain that? I think, you know, the difference between the culture now, as Chrissy mentioned earlier, and the difference between now and when Singable started, is obviously different. You know, we are, that it's not, initially it was more controlled by me, whereas now it's obviously of its own doing, and it changes every single time that we employ someone, and they bring to it and they add to it. So I think maintaining, as long as we're core to our key and strong on our values, the culture itself can move a little bit, because it has to be flexible. Just like everything else in business, it's changing all the time. But our values are our core, and I don't see any concern. I didn't anticipate. I can't even imagine any kind of concern about where the culture would somehow break down as we grow, because the values are around, as I said, doing the right thing. Now, the challenge is that I could never run probably a multi-billion-pound company, because I would never be prepared to do the things that you have to do to your team or employees to run that kind of business. That's fine. That just means that I'm not going to be that person. Now, you could argue then, does this kind of human-centric approach break down when you get to that level? I'm not sure. Possibly. I think there's, you know, there haven't been enough real examples at that level to show that it can do. It should, but that doesn't mean it can. It just means it hasn't been tested or done in the right way. So I think it's it is that thing. And so I think that close monitoring is probably the wrong word, but that close kind of check-ins about, are we still doing the right thing? Are we doing what's right for the situation? Whatever happens, I think is really, really important. And, you know, growing will, you know, as we are, and also as we will do in the next few years as well, will add more stress and pressure to the team. But it's about making sure that we support people in the right way. You know, our people team is larger from a percentage point of view than most companies, considering the number of people we have. You know, you find often that, you know, a company that has 1,500 people might only have 2 people in their HR team, pretty much just hiring and firing the whole time. Really undervalues what the people team or HR team can do from a proactive point of view. So we are kind of set up to be able to support people through that growth. There will be people that won't be with us in a couple of years for whatever reason, and there will be new people that come in, and that's completely fine. But the consistency around how we are as a culture, I think, will definitely sustain itself over the next few years.
That is fascinating, and I'm again, I saw you pop on the the screen there, Jonathan, inviting people to leave their comments. But I'd love to hear people's thoughts on what Ollie just said there about the concept of acting with integrity, authenticity, and those leadership principles. I sort of broadly put them under the sort of branch of transformational leadership principles. Does that align to the concept of high performance here? Will that be will you be a billionaire leader in the future? And I don't think those two things are in opposition. Leadership is under challenge at the moment. We can see that on a global level, and both in politics, commercial, and other areas of our lives. And the concept of autocracy and not acting with humility and lack of integrity feels like it's the sort of high-profile leadership model. But I completely subscribe to your leadership model, Ollie, and I think you're already in a small way, but a growing way, seeing the benefits of that form of leadership. And I think what we need to do, and this is why I love what we do at the People and Culture Association, is flying the flag for that model of leadership and showing that that is not soft. That's sometimes, actually, you know something, being rude and uncivil and unpleasant and acting without integrity or humility, I think that's soft leadership. I think that's easy, dare I say, lazy leadership. I think the hard leadership is the leadership that comes from acting with integrity, being true to yourself, and holding yourself to a high standard and inviting others to do so is tough. I find that a very tough and courageous form of leadership. I find the other stuff a little bit weak and sometimes occasionally leading in the lazy. So I think it's something. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this, whether or not you're listening live today or listening to us on demand. Please do share your thoughts. Is the model of leadership that we're hearing here the kind of culture? Is this the kind of stuff that can propel our organisations into hyper growth and rapid growth? I think so. What do you think? I'd love to hear from you. Please do share your thoughts. And Chrissy, back to yourself in terms of
David, if I could come in for a second.
Please, yeah, Jonathan, of course.
Yeah, I just thought, because I remember in the backstage I was speaking to Chrissy about this, that I know that Singable has the advantage and the luxury of not having to come and clean the room up. It was always people first right from the start, so they had that opportunity, and of course the leadership to identify the fact that if they had invested in it early on, they would have kind of invited people into the company, new employees, into a clean room already, where the culture is already set and it is a transparent culture. And Chrissy, you said that it's been the same when you were 20 people. It's the same now. It's the same later when you all expanded to 40. It's the same now as you'll continue to expand. So, and I'm wondering whether is there some kind of metrics that you all follow in terms of also the people you all bring in? Because I think besides talent retention, talent recruitment is also very crucial to kind of bring in the right people into that culture. This is a culture that's been set by the people, but when you're bringing someone else in, and as Ollie said, the culture will go on no matter who's in and out because it's set by the people. But do you have some kind of matrix or some kind of a structure in place that you'll follow to kind of in terms of bringing people in as well?
Yeah, so we are very strict in our recruitment, in the recruitment process, to make sure that people are really clear and transparent on expectations when they join. So them knowing what they're coming into. We do look at our people metrics, so our retention rates. We have very low churn, and Ollie will tell you, I do like a little bit of churn because it does bring, a sense of excitement and adventure when somebody new comes and starts raising that bar. So I don't like people getting too comfortable. We always say get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's when we're learning and we're developing all the time. So we do keep an eye on our metrics because of our people first, and we love our well-being and making sure our teams are okay. Our sick metrics might be quite a little bit higher than maybe average. But actually, on a whole, I think, our annual surveys that go out, we send surveys to employees to comment on their managers twice a year. We do pulse surveys throughout the year to get a real feel. Also, I know it will change as we get bigger, but we have our quarterly team catch-ups, which are always in person. So again, getting everybody together to make sure when you're with people and in the office, you get a feel for what's happening as well. And so, yes, we do look at some metrics, but I don't think that's necessarily the be all and end all. Just picking up a little bit on what David said as well with regards to the easy way out and the way that we are actually, it's quite hard. It was certainly, I don't see it as an easy way of leadership, putting people first. And actually we've pushed forward. Part of that is around honesty and transparency. So these weekly one-to-ones, there's always a difficult conversation. You know, if it needs to be had, that it's already set there for them. And it's about having that real-time feedback. Unless we have that real-time feedback, we can't change anything. So our processes are put into place that actually support the culture, but I don't think it's an easy way out. I think it's harder.
Thank you, Chrissy. One of the things I say in my book, and thank you, Jonathan, and I know we've come to conflict resolution. I'm interested in conflict resolution, change management as part of an expression of culture. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, Ollie and Chrissy, on this. I know, Jonathan, both of us come from a background in mediation and restorative practice, so it's always interesting because how do we handle it when things go off the cliff? And that's always an interesting point and an interesting challenge. But Chrissy, one of the points that Ollie talked about was sort of lots of data points and information within the organization. And I talk in the book about the concept of an oracular people and culture function. The people function as oracle, a strategic seer with its finger on all of these connections between managers, colleagues, leaders, and others, listening, engaging, empowering, and pulling all of this data into the people function in order to be able to help the organization gain one significant piece of competitive advantage, which is to be able to predict the future, to be predictive and proactive. And so it's a shift from the traditional HR model of transactional and reactive, often driven through policy, and actually shifting the dial, high trust environment, focus on dialogue, integrity, humility, insight, creativity. All of that data comes into HR, or the people function, is aggregated, assimilated, and then used to provide the sort of strategic focus for the leader. That helps us say, actually, let's think about what the future looks like and how does that build in. Just interested to how you use data. I mean, so that's my vision for this people function of an oracular people function as the oracle, but it's like I say, it's aspirational. But just curious to know how you're using the data that's coming through all of these touch points through the employee life cycle, and how that might be then able to support Ollie and other leaders within Singable to predict the future, what that might look like.
Yeah, I mean, we could always be better at using data, I think, and certainly as a business, we've noticed over the last few years how much we rely on, or how much we need more of that data and have it more accessible. So yes, we do have data, and which we use to be able to push that forward, making sure that, you know, we're within a realm of like sickness, holidays, absence, to be able to predict how much that's going to cost us, you know, as we continue to grow, and make sure we're doing the proactive work if there's high absence levels or sickness levels, you know, in certain departments. So we definitely use that data. I think we definitely push it to the next level. We're certainly not there as in predicting everything of the future yet to be able to do that. The way that, like I said, the way that we work is actually making sure that we are partnering with the business. You know, I'm on the board with Ollie. We've got a head of people in the leadership team that are speaking to the senior leaders all of the time and their challenges to how we can support them. So maybe the way that we work is probably less data driven. Obviously the pulse surveys that we send out, our annual survey that we do, and we always, you know, drill into that data to see what else we can be doing. But yeah, we don't I think we could use it.
That's very honest, and thank you for your candor. I think you're a long way forward, in fairness, Chrissy, anyway, but there's always more that could be done. I just wonder, Ollie, for your perspective as a business leader, how useful that would be, and how much more information would be useful for you to have to help you create that sort of drive and the strategic narrative for growth.
I mean, I think purely from a people point of view, I think everything that kind of where we take action, whether it be sort of conflict or performance or whatever, does start with a conversation rather than a data point. So it's not a case of, yes, we use data to support kind of decisions, people decisions, and obviously speaking purely from a people point of view here. In other parts of the company, obviously data is often the first point, but from a people point of view, let's focus on the people first rather than data, and use data to help support the decisions that we want to make. But ultimately, it comes from a conversation that maybe come up from a one-to-one that might need more exploring, or it might need further from there. So there is obviously a need in this day and age to help with decision making with data, but you can go too far and try and manage with data specifically, when actually, to be honest, the biggest kind of issue that people have is actually just sitting down in front of someone and talking to them is sometimes often the scariest part, rather than managing through spreadsheets or dashboards. Just sit down in front of them and ask them how they're feeling, or even just read their body language, and you'll learn more in that, like on an individual level, than you would do looking at any data before doing any of that. And that's the fear that people often have, is just chatting to someone about things.
Yeah, I love that. I think the data points that can come out, I think, can be useful. And I've heard, so if we're having those, so I talked earlier about the kind of what keeps you awake at night conversation. I think we were talking behind the scenes on that question of what keeps you awake at night. That's useful data. There's another great data point, which is what do you need to get that better sleep? I think that's one of the conversation where we talk about sleep. What keeps you awake at night, and what do you need in order to not keep you awake at night? And when we start to ask what do you need and then how could you implement it, it generates 3 really powerful data points: creativity, innovation, and insight. And when we get creativity, innovation, and insight through that conversation, so what keeps you awake? What do you need? Then how do we create an innovative solution to that? When all of those innovative solutions, it might just be one small systemic change, institutional change, cultural change, one small thing that we do. But when all of those small things are aggregated across the whole, then we start to see really powerful data coming through. So I often think about data more in terms of the people data, driven through needs, creativity, insight, and innovation, to help then feed into the strategic narrative of the leadership function within the organization. And that may well be one of the conversations that would happen in that relationship between the CPO and the COO as you're evolving that data and that understanding of the data, because you don't need spreadsheets. It's the interactions, the engagement, the learning, the insight, because ultimately the currency of the future of work, as we become more digitalized and AI driven and focus on the human role, the augmented human at work, is innovation, creativity, and insight, because that's what we bring in back. And then that's what we bring in back. So those are the sort of the data points that I think about really more than spreadsheets. But we've got a couple of points. Rob, you made a point earlier, and we haven't come back to it. Forgive me, Rob, but you made a really lovely point. I thought I'd be interested, Chrissy, to hear your thoughts on this, because it speaks to some of the work you've been doing around trust within the organization, and that trust is such a fundamental point. Rob, you talked about treating everyone as replaceable results in a low performing organization, and that speaks to me about how when it goes back to a point we were raising earlier about how people experience your leadership, Ollie, and experience the world of work at Singable. But it's also, I think, also about some elements of the case study that you produced, Chrissy, around trust within Singable. I just wondered, thinking about Rob's statement and thinking about that through the lens of trust, did you have any thoughts on that, and any work that you're doing at Singable to build that high trust environment to drive performance?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's given trust from day one. That's part of our, everyone is trusted. If somebody breaks that trust, it gets dealt with. We don't change a policy because someone's abused a policy or anything like that. We actually deal with that individual themselves. So, but I think it goes back to doing what you say and say what you do. We give people the trust and autonomy to kind of run their functions. I mean, I come up with some crazy ideas of what I want to put into place, and Ollie just has a trust and goes, just try it. It's a real pleasure to be able to just go and try things and do things and see if they work. From Rob's comment with regards to being replaceable, I think every business in every role is replaceable. I don't think anyone in a business is irreplaceable, but that shouldn't form part of your relationship with that individual, whether they're there with you for 12 months or 5 years. When somebody comes to resign and leaves us, it's good to understand why, and we can learn from that. Has there been any issues? But I know I take a strong stance, and so does Ollie, and we wouldn't ever try and persuade that person to stay. That's for that person's made that decision at that time, and that's right for them. So we can actually support that exit. So I don't think they are necessarily, just because people are replaceable, you should treat them in a poor way.
And you talk about leaving well, I think, as a success story again in the case study, Chris. You mentioned that concept of leaving well. So you kind of, although the trust might have broken down or the relationship broken down, you're still looking at the offboarding and the exiting as being a positive experience for people as well. I think it's about that language and the mindset that you're creating. So Jackie, hello Jackie, I haven't spoken to you for a very long time. I hope you're well, Jackie. Nice to have you here joining us at today's People and Culture Transforming Work Videocast. And we were talking earlier about the concept of transformational leadership, agile, authentic, empathetic, connected, listening first, people first approach. That is, it's clear and evident that's very much in the leadership maxims that you're delivering there. But you talk, Jackie, about followership here, and it's a really interesting one, and people expecting autocracy. And I just wondered how you handle it if people say, well, I don't live to work, I work to live, and I don't really want to have to go through all of this engagement stuff and pull surveys. I'm here to do a job. And almost they kind of the followers of leaders expect that they are sort of that they have autocracy, or they don't want to be empowered. And I just wonder, have you come across that, and how you handle that if people are saying, well, actually, I just, you're the boss, you tell us what to do, gaffer, and we'll just get on and do it.
I mean, we get that fairly often. I think.
Okay. Yeah.
It's, as Christy kind of mentioned initially, like that honeymoon period of trying to kind of work with someone sort of transition into like the way that we want to work.
Yeah.
The first 3 months is often unpicking bad habits that people have worked at from previous jobs. And, that's fine. If someone wants to work in that way, where they get given a list of things to do on a Monday, and then Friday they have a check-in with their manager and work out what they've done and what they haven't done, that's completely fine. It's just probably not going to work at Singable, because we're a little bit more, it's a little bit less like that, and you need to take that initiative and kind of work with. So there's no judgment there. It's just the way that we want to set this company up and the way that we want to grow. It might not necessarily work there.
Yeah.
But I think one of the other things is that you can hear all of what kind of I'm saying specifically, and think that we don't keep people as accountable, and it's a little bit more of a like free for all, and that isn't the case at all. Again, that's not mutually exclusive. In fact, actually, one of the benefits of kind of doing this, and indirect benefits, not the reason why we do this, is that obviously, we provide really good benefits, and we provide kind of good support structure and all these sort of things, is that when we do need people to really kind of knuckle down for a short period of time or whatever it is, then there's less of that for me, again, sleeping at night, there's less of that guilt if I'm asking someone to push a little bit harder, because I know that overall this isn't a regular thing. This isn't something that we ask all of our team to do 60-hour weeks or whatever it is. And we're very clear about people working late after 5 o'clock. So I think it's really important that we make sure that we do that. But there are people that work best for other companies, bigger people that are used to more structure, more process from bigger corporates, often don't work well. So when we're recruiting, we really need to try and make sure that the culture of that person their personality isn't used to having all the structure and all of that process, that they're willing to be flexible with how we do.
It's amazing. It sounds really, really, and sort of, that's sort of discretionary effort that might be called upon from time to time. There's almost a sort of balance there, but it's a very kind of balance that which pivots on a people-centered approach, and it may not feel it when you're saying it, and I don't know how it feels. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it may not feel progressive or modern. But I can assure you, having spoken to a great many leaders over a great many years and listened to them describing their leadership challenges from one form or another, the way that you're working and the kind of culture that you're creating feels to me very modern, very progressive, very, for me, very much around the transformational culture principles that we advocate through the PCA and through the TCM group, which is about fairness and justice and kindness, compassion, values and purpose, when combined to create high performance. And I think you've indicated and demonstrated here today, Chrissy and Ollie, just how an organization can pull those principles together to create a powerful organization which drives positive results and brings people together and brings the best people in and keeps them in the organization through the work that you're doing. And I just wonder, the question, sorry, Ollie,
I was going to say, isn't that sad, the fact that that's the exception, you know, being kind to your employees and supporting them through things, isn't that a little bit indicative of maybe the world that we live in at the moment, that that's what they see modern, when actually all you're doing is being human to other humans and working together, you know? The
challenge is, and it's a really interesting point, I talk about this a lot, I think people are instinctively and intuitively empathetic and kind and compassionate. People don't come to work to do a bad job, and leaders don't come to work to be a bad leader per se. It's almost that we kind of, our systems and structures have designed it out. And I think what you've demonstrated at Singable, and I've been very moved by it and inspired by it, if I'm honest, is you've actively, deliberately and intentionally designed it in. What you're saying is bring your best self to work. And I know that's a much coined used phrase and no one quite knows what it means. But I think you're saying bring the best of you to work and we'll create a place where you can be the best of you at Singable. And I think that then creates a space for people to be able to do that. And I think if we work on that basis, people don't come to work to do a bad job and we don't intentionally seek to be a bad leader. It's maybe the system. I'm not saying people shouldn't take responsibility for what comes out of their mouth and what they say or do. That's not my point. My point is, if the system itself has designed out kindness and compassion and empathy and dialogue and engagement and insight and that co-creation, you've deliberately and intentionally, it would seem to me, redesign those back in. And that's, I think, what makes the difference. And I celebrate what you're doing. And I think there are organizations doing this. I said we've got 30 incredible chief people officer stories, but each one of them felt, as I was speaking to them from their perspective, that they were doing something quite unique and special and different. And what I'm really excited about, and you're the first today of our CPO CEO sort of stories and looking at the wonderful work you're doing, because we're really excited about shining a light on what you're doing and celebrating it, because it's fantastic. And I think people, I hope, will be taking notice. But I just wonder, Ollie and Chris, I'm going to ask the sort of final question really, and it's just looking ahead through the lens of people and culture. And Chris, I'll start with yourself. You know, what does the future look like for yourself in terms of the people and culture imperative at Singable?
Yeah, obviously, as a growing business, we never know what's around the corner, so we don't know what we don't know, but we know that it's going to change, and we just need to be able to make sure that we're reacting to the business needs quickly, and making sure that we're supporting. As a support function, we work across obviously all of the departments to be able to push that forward. Our biggest project, which will be starting next year, is more around manager leadership. As we get further and further away from being hands-on, it's really important that we're investing what it means to be a manager here at Singable, and to be able to release the reins and let people take that on forward, but obviously making sure our values are at the core.
Love that, Chrissy. Thank you so much. Now, Ollie, you've also had your dog there. I think I can see your but we love that. It's Friday. Bring our pet to work. What sort of dog have you got, Ollie? What dog?
She's a spaniel. She causes chaos. Yeah. So every little sound in the office, she kind of barks at. So yeah.
She's keen to be part of our people and culture conversation. She would be very welcome, I hasten to add. But I think the final word will be yours. As much as the dog might want to contribute, Ollie, but just for your lens, what's the future of sort of the people and culture imperative look like for you?
Lots of change in the next couple of years. I think the key would be to ensure that we are sticking close to our values whilst also being flexible enough that the culture and benefits and everything else wrapped around that stays the same. The culture is rooted in values, not necessarily in people. like it is, but obviously the values are the thing that drives everything. So for me, being that agile and being flexible enough to alter things when we know they're not working, or test things, I think is really important. But the values, being true to them, I think is paramount, really.
I think that's so powerful. I think when you bring those values which are paramount to the organization and couple them with those sort of authentic, agile leadership qualities that you've described there, and working with a people leader, Chrissy, with yourself to make that come to life in the way you structure the organization through your people processes, leadership and management behaviors, that speaks to me of an organization that is not always going to get it right. There's no, there's no perfect. It's not perfect. No, there's no, and no one should hold themselves up to being perfect. I think that's an aspiration too far, but good is good enough. And it sounds good to me what you're creating there at Singable. What an amazing conversation. Ollie and Chrissy, thank you so much for being such fabulous guests and sharing so candidly and honestly your experiences, your views, and your perceptions. Chrissy, the book's out in January. You'll be invited to the launch party, as will you, of course, Ollie. And the chance, if you're interested, People and Culture comes out on the 3rd of January. You can read Chrissy's amazing case study, which is embedded in the book, along with a whole host of other chief people officers. So please do join us for upcoming Transforming Work videocasts. I know Jonathan will be sharing it all across social media and into your inboxes and elsewhere. So please do join us at future events. If you're listening to this on record, please do let us know what you think, share any questions. And for everyone who's joined us live today, thank you for being part of today's conversation. This is really about the people, culture, and leadership imperative. And goodness me, haven't we focused on that in some amazing detail today? There's been some great insights and takeaways for you to put into practice in your own organizations. And as always, we're really keen to hear from you at the People and Culture Association. Share your questions and your thoughts and your reflections. Please do feel free to stay in touch. And don't hesitate to join the People and Culture Association. Did anyone tell you it's free to come and join this incredible community of people, professionals and leaders across the globe? We do such a lot of work, as Jonathan said at the start. So Ollie, again, Chrissy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and see everyone at our next Transforming Work videocast.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Thanks, Jonathan, as always, for making it all happen.